The room was filled with a
Shh,
kind of silence that felt heavier
he
than
is
gunfire,
perfect, isn't he?
in a world where fear usually answered every
Shh,
problem.
मेरा प्यारा सो
Nothing
जाओ अब।
seemed to work for the tiny
हाँ,
baby
बिल्कुल ठीक,
lying in a
मम्मा के
cradle
पास जाओ।
surrounded by armed guards and expensive machines. The most feared mafia boss in the city could make grown men tremble with a single look, but right now, he stood helpless, watching his infant son turn away from every bottle. The baby cried weakly, refusing formula, refusing food, refusing to survive. Doctors whispered. Nurses tried everything. Time was slipping away, and no amount of power, money, or threats could force a newborn to eat. The boss had built his life on control. He controlled streets, deals, and destinies. But he could not control this. Each hour that passed made the baby smaller, quieter, and more fragile. The monitors beeped softly, counting moments that felt like they were running out. For the first time in his life, the boss felt real fear. Not fear of enemies, not fear of prison, but fear of losing the only innocent thing he had left in his world. Word spread quietly through the mansion that the baby was fading. Staff walked on tiptoe. No one spoke loudly. No one wanted to be the one to deliver bad news. In a house known for power and danger, the weakest voice was now the most important. And still, the baby would not eat. That's when the maid noticed something no one else did. She wasn't a doctor. She wasn't important in the way people in that house usually were. She cleaned rooms, carried laundry, and stayed invisible. But she had raised children before. She had seen hungry babies. She had seen sick babies. And when she looked at the boss's child, she saw not just illness, but a kind of rejection, like the baby's body was saying no to everything being offered. Quietly, carefully, she spoke up. Her voice shook as she suggested something simple, something old, something natural. The room went still. The idea sounded impossible in a house ruled by strict lines and unspoken rules. Some people looked shocked. Some looked angry. The boss himself stared at her, tried to decide if this was desperation talking or real hope. The maid explained that sometimes, when babies refuse formula, expressed breast milk can make a difference. Not in a dramatic way. Not in a miracle story way. Just in a human way. A way that reminds a newborn of comfort, safety, and life. The doctors hesitated. The guards shifted. The boss said nothing for a long moment. Then he looked at his son. The baby's tiny chest rose and fell, slow and uneven. In that moment, power meant nothing. Pride meant nothing. Only one thing mattered: saving his child. What happened next would change everything inside that house. A simple act from someone no one noticed could become the turning point between life and loss. But as a decision was about to be made, one question hung heavy in the air. Would this unexpected choice save the baby or reveal a secret that no one was ready for? The room did not move for several long seconds after the maid finished speaking. The air felt thick, as if everyone was afraid to breathe. The boss finally turned away from the crib and walked toward the tall window, his back to everyone. From the outside, he looked calm, but inside, his mind was racing. He had trusted no one for years. In his world, even kindness often came with a hidden price. Now a simple maid was standing in front of him, offering a solution that went against everything he controlled. The doctors quietly discussed among themselves. One of them mentioned that in rare cases, babies do respond better to natural milk. Another reminded everyone of hospital rules and safety concerns. The guards shifted their weight, hands resting near their belts out of habit. No one wanted to make the wrong call. The baby's weak cry cut through the room again, small but heartbreaking. It wasn't loud. It wasn't strong. It sounded tired. The maid stood still, her hands folded in front of her, eyes lowered in respect. But inside, her heart was pounding. She had not planned to speak. She knew the risks. In a house like this, being noticed could be dangerous. Yet something in the baby's face had pushed her forward. It reminded her of her own past, of nights spent holding a sick child, praying for any sign of improvement. She wasn't thinking about power or fear. She was thinking about a baby who just wanted to live. The boss slowly turned back around. His eyes went from the doctors to the guards and finally to the maid. For a moment, his gaze softened, just a little. It was a look very few people had ever seen. "How do you know this will help?" he asked quietly. His voice carried no threat. but the weight of the room made it feel heavier than a shout. The maid swallowed. She explained that she had helped raise children in her family, that she had seen babies who refused bottles but accepted natural milk. She said it wasn't a promise. It was only a chance. The kind of chance people take when they are running out of options. As she spoke, another truth stayed hidden behind her words. She did not say why she understood the situation so deeply. She did not explain the part of her life that connected her to this moment in a way no one else in the room could see. There was a reason her hands shook. There was a reason her eyes kept drifting back to the baby. But she kept those reasons to herself. The doctors exchanged looks again. One of them nodded slowly, as if admitting they had reached the edge of what medicine alone could do. The boss listened, but his thoughts went far beyond the room. He thought about enemies who would celebrate his weakness. He thought about rumors that would spread if people knew his son was dying. Most of all, he thought about the strange twist of fate that had put his child's life in the hands of someone he barely knew. Outside the door, the mansion stayed quiet, but not peaceful. Phones buzzed. Men waited for orders. The world of crime and power did not stop just because a baby was fighting to survive. Somewhere in that same city, people were watching, waiting for any sign that the boss was vulnerable. Back in the room, the maid took a small step forward without realizing it. The baby stirred again, his tiny fingers curling and uncurling in the air. It was a small movement, but it felt like a signal, a fragile reminder that time was still moving. The boss looked down at his son, then back at the maid. The decision was close now, too close, and as the tension tightened, one thing became clear. This was not just about saving a baby. This moment was opening a door to secrets, risks, and connections that could change every life in that room forever. The boss finally gave a short nod, not a full answer, but enough to let everyone know he was considering it. The doctors took it as a signal to prepare, moving quietly, checking files, making phone calls, confirmed safety steps. The guards remained in place, but their eyes followed every movement the maid made now. In a house built on suspicion, trust did not come easily, especially not towards someone who had suddenly become this important. The maid was asked gentle but serious questions about her health, about her past, about anything that could matter. She answered simply, carefully choosing her words. She shared only what she had to. Each answer felt like walking on thin glass. One wrong word could end everything. Yet she stayed calm on the outside, even as her thoughts raced. She knew that once this path started, there would be no turning back. In another part of the mansion, the baby's mother sat alone in a quiet room. Few people were allowed near her. Her health was fragile, both in body and spirit. The birth had been hard, and the stress of the boss's world had taken its toll. She wanted to be there with her child, but doctors had insisted she rest. From her bed, she could hear distant footsteps and feel the tension in the air. She knew something serious was happening, even if no one told her everything. She held a small blanket in her hands, the one meant for her baby. Her fingers tightened around it as fear crept in. In her heart, she felt that strange pull mothers often feel when something is wrong with their child. She wanted to stand up, to go to him, to protect him. But she was weak, and the walls of that mansion felt heavier than ever. Meanwhile, the boss's most trusted aide watched everything closely. He had been with the boss for years, through deals, betrayals, and battles. He had learned to read danger in silence and secrets in small details. The maid's sudden importance did not sit right with him, not because he doubted her intentions, but because in their world, coincidences were rare. He began quietly looking into her background, making calls, asking questions, not to harm her, but to understand what no one else seemed to see yet. The maid could feel eyes on her wherever she went. Every step down the hallway felt louder than it should. Every door felt heavier. She focused on one thing only, the baby. She thought about how small he was, how weak his cry had sounded. She told herself that whatever happened next, she had to stay strong for him, even if it meant putting herself at risk. The doctors finally said they would need a little time to prepare everything properly. That time felt endless. The baby slept lightly, his breathing shallow, his tiny body rising and falling like it might stop at any moment. The boss stood nearby, closer than he had ever stood to anyone. His tough mask slipped, when he thought no one was looking. His hand hovered near the crib, unsure if he was allowed to touch, unsure if he was ready for how real this pain felt. Outside the room, whispers moved through the halls. Some staff felt hope for the first time. Others felt fear. In a place ruled by strict control, this simple, human solution felt like a crack in the walls. A crack where truth, secrets, and unexpected connections could slip through. As preparations continued, the tension only grew. Every person in that house was being pulled into this moment in different ways. Power, loyalty, fear, and compassion were colliding. And at the center of it all was a fragile baby and a maid whose past might be more connected to this story than anyone yet realized. The choice was coming closer. The consequences were still unknown. And the silence before that choice felt louder than anything that had ever echoed through those halls. The hallway outside the nursery felt tighter than before, as if the walls themselves were closing in. The doctors moved with quiet urgency, their voices low, their faces serious. Every small delay felt dangerous. Every extra minute felt like something could go wrong. The boss stood near the door now, no longer pacing, no longer giving orders. He was still, watching, waiting, trapped in a moment where his usual strength meant nothing. The maid sat on a chair nearby, hands resting in her lap, trying to slow her breathing. Her thoughts drifted back to things she had buried for a long time. Moments from her past that she had sworn never to bring into this life. She had come to this house to work, to stay invisible, to survive quietly. She had never imagined she would be standing this close to the most powerful man in the city, with his child's life somehow tied to her. The boss's aide returned with a tense look on his face. He leaned in and whispered something to the boss. The words were not loud, but the shift in the boss's expression was clear. His jaw tightened. His eyes narrowed for just a second before he hit it again. Whatever the aide had found, it added another layer to an already heavy situation. The maid noticed a change. She felt it in the room. Something had shifted. The baby stirred again, letting out a weak sound that barely filled the air. The boss stepped closer to the crib, finally placing his hand gently on the edge. His fingers trembled slightly. He had faced danger without blinking, but this was different. This was his blood, his future, the part of his life that was not built on fear or control. In another room, the baby's mother tried to sit up, ignoring the pain in her body. She called for a nurse, her voice shaking. She needed to see her child. She needed to be part of whatever was happening. The nurse tried to calm her, saying everything possible was being done, but that did not ease her fear. A mother's heart does not listen to calm words when her child is in danger. Back in the nursery, the doctor said they were almost ready. The room grew quiet again, but this time it felt sharper, more intense. The guards stood straighter. The staff held their breath. Even the machine seemed louder in the stillness. The maid stood up slowly, as if the movement itself carried weight. Every eye turned toward her. She could feel the pressure, the unspoken questions, the mix of hope and doubt. She met the boss's gaze for a brief moment. In that look, there was fear, trust, and something close to desperation. Two people from completely different worlds, connected by a fragile life in between. The aide watched closely, his mind racing. If what he had uncovered was true, this was no longer just a medical decision. It was personal. It was dangerous. It could change loyalties, expose secrets, and shake the balance inside the house. But there was no time to confront it now. The baby did not have time for long conversations or careful plans. The doctors gave a final nod. They said everything was ready. The room seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting for something unseen. The maid took a small step forward. The boss moved closer to the crib. The baby's tiny chest rose and fell, each breath feeling like a countdown. In that moment, it felt like the entire house, maybe even the entire city, was balanced on one fragile decision. A decision that could bring hope or uncover truths that no one was prepared to face. And just as the tension reached its breaking point, when every heart in the room seemed to stop at once, something unexpected happened that would push everything to the edge. Before anyone could move closer to the crib, the door opened suddenly. Not loudly, not violently, but with a quiet firmness that made every head turn. The baby's mother stood there, pale, holding onto the doorframe for support. She had pushed herself out of bed despite the doctor's orders. Her eyes went straight to her child, filled with fear, love, and a deep sense of urgency. The room froze. No one had expected her. The boss stepped forward instinctively, telling her softly that she should be resting. But she shook her head. Her voice was weak, yet steady. She said she needed to be there. She said a mother should not be kept away when her child's life was on the line. As she moved closer to the crib, her eyes fell on the maid. For a brief second, something strange passed between them. A look that lasted only a heartbeat, but carried more than simple curiosity. The maid felt it too. Her chest tightened. There was recognition there. Not clear, not fully formed, but enough to make both women uneasy. The boss's aide noticed it immediately. He had been watching faces, reactions, small details. This was not a normal exchange between two strangers. His mind connected pieces faster now. The background checks, the timing, the maid's sudden role in this moment, the way the baby's mother seemed drawn to her, without knowing why. A quiet alarm went off in his head. The doctors hesitated. The presence of the baby's mother changed everything. She asked what was happening. The boss tried to explain in simple words, avoiding too much detail. He said they were trying one more option, one last chance to help their son eat. Her eyes filled with tears as she listened. She nodded slowly, holding back emotion, trusting that everyone in that room wanted the same thing. But when she heard who would be helping, her gaze returned to the maid. Her voice trembled as she asked softly, "Do I know you?" The maid felt her throat tighten. She lowered her eyes, saying no, they had never met, but inside memories stirred. Old places, old faces, a past she had worked hard to forget. The baby whimpered again, pulling everyone back to the present. The sound cut through the tension like a knife. The mother reached into the crib, touching her child's tiny hand. The baby's fingers wrapped weakly around her finger, and she nearly broke down right there. The boss placed a hand on her shoulder, trying to be strong for both of them. The aide stepped aside, making another quiet call. His voice was low, his words careful. Whatever he was confirming, it was serious. His face grew tighter with every second. When he ended the call, he did not look relieved. He looked more concerned than ever. The maid stood still, feeling the weight of eyes and unspoken thoughts. She could sense that her past was closing in on her, that this house, this baby, and this family might not be strangers after all. The closer they got to helping the baby, the closer they got to uncovering something no one had planned to face today. The doctors said they needed to move quickly now. The baby's condition was fragile. Delays could be dangerous. The room filled with urgency again, but now it was mixed with suspicion, emotion, and questions no one dared to ask out loud. The boss looked from his wife, to his child, to the maid. His instincts told him something was off, even if he could not yet explain it. Trust and doubt pulled at him at the same time. The baby's life pushed him forward, but the strange connections forming in front of him held him back. As the moment approached, it became clear that this was no longer just about feeding a baby. It was about hidden histories, unexpected ties, and a truth that was slowly rising to surface. And just before the next step could be taken, just before everything might change, a single piece of information came in that threatened to turn this entire situation upside down. The boss's aide stepped back into the room, his face pale, his eyes fixed on the boss. He leaned in and spoke in a low voice, but this time the words carried enough weight that everyone could feel them. The maid was not just a random worker. Her record showed gaps, name changes, a past that had been carefully buried. And one detail stood out above all others. Years ago, she had given birth in a small clinic connected to people who later vanished from the city. The boss's expression hardened, but he did not explode. He did not shout. He looked at the maid slowly, carefully, as if trying to see through time itself. "What aren't you telling us?" he asked quietly. The room held its breath. The maid's shoulders sagged. Tears filled her eyes before she could stop them. She had known this moment might come one day. She had just never expected it to come like this, in front of this child, in this house. Her voice shook as she admitted that long ago, she had lost a baby under strange and painful circumstances. She had been told the child did not survive. She had never been allowed to see him. She had been young, scared, and powerless. The baby's mother felt dizzy as she listened. Her heart pounded in her chest. Pieces began to shift in her mind. Memories of rushed medical decisions, of people who told her what to believe, of gaps in stories that never quite made sense. She looked at her husband, then at the maid, then down at her child. Fear and confusion mixed in her eyes. The doctors interrupted gently, reminding everyone that time was running out. The baby's condition was getting worse. Whatever truths were coming out, the baby still needed help now. The boss made a decision in that moment that shocked everyone. He told them to proceed. Not later. Not after more questions. Now, he said they would deal with everything else after his son was safe. The room shifted into action. The tension was thick, but there was also a strange sense of focus. The maid moved closer, hands shaking but determined. The baby's mother stood right beside her, watching every move, torn between fear and hope. When the baby was finally offered what the doctors had prepared, everyone watched in silence. 1 second passed. Then another. The baby stirred. His tiny mouth moved. For a terrifying moment, it looked like nothing would change. Then it happened. The baby latched weakly, then more steadily. A soft sound filled the room. A sound no one had heard from him in days. He was feeding. The baby's mother covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. The boss felt his knees weaken, though he stayed standing. The doctors exchanged stunned looks. The monitors began to show small but clear signs of improvement. The baby's breathing steadied. His color slowly improved. Hope rushed into the room like fresh air after a storm. For the first time since his son had been born, the boss allowed himself to believe his child might live. The maid cried quietly, not just from relief, but from something deeper, a connection she could not explain but felt in her bones. The baby calmed in a way he never had before, as if he recognized something familiar. The doctors said it was working. They said the baby was responding. The crisis, for now, was passing. But just as everyone began to breathe again, the baby's mother stepped closer to the maid. Her voice was soft, almost shaking. "There's something I need to tell you," she said. She admitted that years ago, before this baby, she had been told she could not have children, that a mysterious donation and complicated medical process had helped make this pregnancy possible. Details she had never fully understood. Names she had never been given. The room went silent again. The boss's aide's eyes widened as the truth finally connected. The maid's breath caught in her throat. The baby lay peacefully in the crib, finally resting. The main conflict was resolved. The baby was saved. But the truth that surfaced was even more powerful. This child might not be connected to this family in the way everyone believed. And just when they thought the worst was over, they realized something even bigger had begun. Because saving the baby had not only brought him back to life, it had brought buried secrets back with him. The room did not explode with shouting or chaos. Instead, it filled with a quiet that felt even heavier than before. The baby slept peacefully, unaware that his very existence had just changed the lives of everyone around him. The machines continued their soft, steady sounds, now no longer counting down toward loss, but marking a fragile return to life. The boss sat down slowly, as if his body had finally realized how close he had come to losing everything that truly mattered. For years, he had ruled with fear, believing power could protect him from pain. But in that moment, he understood something deeper. No amount of control could replace the simple miracle of a child breathing, feeding, and holding on to life. The baby's mother stood quietly, watching her son sleep. Relief washed over her face, but it was mixed with shock and confusion. The truth she had just spoken out loud still echoed in her mind. She had trusted systems, doctors, and people in power. Now she had to face the reality that parts of her child's story had been hidden from her. It hurt, but her love for the baby did not change. In her heart, he was still her son, the one she had carried, the one she had nearly lost. The maid remained nearby, unsure where she belonged now. Her past was no longer something she could hide. The boss approached her, not with anger, but with a tired, honest look. He thanked her, not as a boss, not as a powerful man, but as a father whose child had been saved. He told her that whatever the truth was, she had given his son a chance to live. That would never be forgotten. The aide quietly confirmed what everyone now suspected. The medical records, the timelines, the missing information all pointed to one thing. The maid's lost child and this baby were connected through a complicated web of medical decisions and hidden agreements. It was not a simple story of right and wrong. It was a story of desperation, secrets, and people making choices that affected lives forever. The boss made another decision that surprised everyone. He said the truth would be uncovered fully, not quietly buried, not ignored. He promised that both women would be given answers, real answers. He said his son deserved to grow up knowing where he came from, not built on lies, but on truth. The baby's mother and the maid shared a long, emotional look. There was no anger between them, only sadness, confusion, and a strange, shared connection to the child. Two women linked by a story neither of them had chosen, but both of them now had to face. Days passed. The baby grew stronger. His cries became louder. His grip became firmer. Each small improvement felt like a victory. The mansion, once filled with fear, slowly felt different. Not softer, not perfect, but changed. The boss spent more time in the nursery than in his office. Power no longer felt as important as presence. The maid was no longer invisible. She was treated with respect, not because of fear, but because of what she had done. She found herself torn between pain for what she had lost and hope for what she had found again in a different form. She did not yet know what her role in the baby's future would be, but she knew one thing. She would never walk away from his life again. The story of the baby who refused to eat became a story of survival, truth, and unexpected connections. A reminder that even in a world filled with darkness, simple human choices can change everything. In the end, it was not power that saved the mafia boss's baby. It was compassion. And sometimes, the strongest families are not just built by blood, but by the courage to face the truth and choose love anyway.